Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. And of course, here's your meme of the day, brought to you by 5mind.com. I don't know about you guys, but I'm just loving the whole conversation right now. You know, over the last couple of weeks, I keep saying the same thing. I keep making the point that the left and their labels and their terms, their little emotional games, their racial politics, that it no longer carries weight anymore. Nobody freaking cares. Nobody's giving in to the emotional blackmail anymore. And you know, as I've been saying this and ranting and raving in all of my videos, well, it seems like I'm not the only one thinking this way. You know, it feels almost as if the entire Trump team is thinking the exact same thing. It's a new era, folks, at least if it's allowed to continue. But I'm telling you guys, it's a brand new era. Identity politics has failed. You know, we're post-boy who cried wolf situation here. Been warning these Democrats forever. The more you use that term, the more you accuse people, the less value we'll attribute to the term. Well, I think we're finally there, folks. Stephen Miller is dropping an absolute bomb on the mass migration scams on the entire Democrat agenda. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks. So, well, I guess probably the best way I could introduce this clip. Could you imagine saying this 10 years ago? Could you imagine saying this during the era of Barack Obama?
So you see with a lot of these immigrant groups, not only is the first generation unsuccessful, again, Somalia is a clear example here, not only is the first generation unsuccessful, but you see persistent issues in every subsequent generation. So you see consistent high rates of welfare use, consistent high rates of criminal activity, consistent failures to assimilate. But this shouldn't be a surprise, Will. It's just common sense. If Somalians cannot make Somalia successful, why would we think that the track record would be any different in the United States? Go third world country by third world country. No one's saying, look, there are people all over the world that are great people. But you look at the society. If Libya keeps failing, if the Central African Republic keeps failing, if Somalia keeps failing, right? If these societies all over the world continue to fail, you have to ask yourself, if you bring those societies into our country and then give them unlimited free welfare, what do we think is going to happen? You're going to replicate the conditions that they left over and over and over again. And we mask the impact of immigration in every public policy issue we discuss. We talk about test scores. Well, if you subtract immigration out of test scores, all of a sudden our test scores skyrocket. If you subtract immigration out of healthcare, all of a sudden we don't have nearly the size of the healthcare challenges our country faces. If you subtract immigration out of public safety, all of a sudden, we don't have violent crime in so many of our cities. Issue after issue, we talk about these things as they just happen to us. The schools just suddenly fail. Violent crime just suddenly explodes. The deficit just suddenly skyrockets. These are a result of social policy choices that we made through immigration.
Yeah, I don't think so, right? But see, that's the beauty. We no longer give a crap. The Democrats have accused us of racism this and racism that. It's become their catch-all defense for every single issue that at this point it no longer has an effect. And again, as I've been saying forever, the most important thing is culture. You know, the left loves to paint this image of racism, right? Oh, your issues, they can all be distilled down to a very simple concept. It's the skin color. You just don't like people because specifically the color of their skin. As if it's the melanin, right? It's the pigmentation. But this notion is ridiculous. As if it's tribal or as if it's solely and particularly linked to the color of skin. It is not. And rather it has everything to do with culture.
It's asinine that we can't have a realistic policy conversation about how certain cultures are quite literally incompatible with ours. It should be okay to say that. And more importantly, it should be okay to base our immigration policy on that.
That's exactly it. It's what I've been saying for years, and I'm glad that people are finally saying it. I'm glad that the talking point is now mainstream because it's true. Not all cultures are created equal. You know, let's just remove other races that aren't white. And let me just ask the simple question. Do you think you're going to get the same results if you import 100,000 people, let's say, from the United Kingdom, and on the other side you import 100,000 people from an Eastern European country or a Balkan country? The simple fact is no. And this is coming from somebody who is Greek. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, you're not going to get the same results from importing mass Greeks as opposed to importing mass French people. It's a cost-benefit analysis that applies to all people, and it has nothing to do with skin color, and rather everything to do with culture. And you know what? I'm going to continue leaning on my own identity for this. This might piss off off many of my Greek followers. They might think I'm being somewhat of a traitor to my people or whatever the hell it is. But the reality is, Greece isn't exactly the most productive country. We like to lounge around, eat French fries, smoke cigarettes, eat some fresh fish. Life in Greece isn't as difficult, the weather's better, we're living on the ocean, food is pretty easy to come by, and so it's just a different culture. It's not the same as the Swedes, for instance, for multiple different reasons. You're probably going to get more problems importing mass Greeks than you would importing mass Swedes. And that now begs the question, does a country have the right to decide who they want to come in? You know, let's say there was a big analysis, a big study that Greek immigrants siphon the taxpayer to the tune of $1 million per person. You know, you'll see stuff like this. 81% of Somali immigrant households are taking welfare, and that remains relatively unchanged, only 3% difference. After 10 years of being in the country, meaning you've had 10 years to stabilize, and yet you're still dependent on government taxpayer dollars, government support. Well, if we had something like this, then if we had massive fraud rings and everything else popping up, and the story in the media was Greek immigrants are not assimilating, they're engaging in mass organized scams. Well, if you were to show me all of those facts, even, again, as a fellow Greek, I would say, well, you know, obviously it's not working out. It's not beneficial for the host nation. And so, you know, you should probably reprioritize bringing in British, German, and French migrants. Why not? If that's best for your nation, then go ahead and do it. Why would you do something following some naive, la-di-da worldview? I mean, just to make yourself feel all warm and fuzzy inside, why would you enact policies that are detrimental to your country? It just makes no sense. Immigration is a very delicate subject, and the idea that you could just pour masses into a nation, millions by the years, with no actual plan, no thought process, and that things would just magically start working, a utopia would form. You know, like what Stephen Miller was saying, you're gonna bring the Somali masses into the country, put them all in one district, in one area, and expect that you're gonna create American results there with no effort. It's just gonna happen naturally because the geography has changed. No, of course not. You're gonna get little Mogadishu. And we gotta be able to say that. We gotta be able to have these conversations without being shamed into silence. And that is the conversation of the day, of the week, of the month, of the year, of the decade. It's time to get to a point where we could start telling the frickin' truth. Statistics tell a story. Perception, in many cases, is a very powerful tool. And the idea that we should remain blind, that we should shut up because we're too scared to be called racists, it's ridiculous. And I hope it's a culture of a bygone era because I personally enjoy the truth. Identifying issues that can be attributed to particular groups does not make you a racist, it makes you perceptive. And well, in the case of Somali immigration, we've been very patient, very accepting, very forgiving, but at this point, yeah, I think most people are coming to the conclusion that it's not worth it. It just isn't in the best interest of the nation, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to start doing things that are. I don't know. Crazy concept in the West for some reason. The rest of the world operates this way, but for some reason, we're held to a different standard now, aren't we? Well, this latest political movement is telling that standard to kick frickin' rocks, and I am here for it. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.